Welcome to episode 109 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's February 17, 1968. It's a European Championship qualifier, and it features one of those scorelines that makes you blink twice because the names don't seem to belong together. Cyprus, a young football nation, still learning what it means to be independent. And Switzerland, a country with World Cup pedigree, with a deep football tradition, and with a history that stretches back to the sport's earliest international days. And yet, on this afternoon in Nicosia, Cyprus beat Switzerland 2-1. It was Cyprus's first ever competitive international win, and some shocks don't just surprise you, they echo because they tell you something bigger about where football is going. Now, before we go to the match itself, we need to understand just how uneven this stage looked in 1968. Because if you're Switzerland, you don't fly to Cyprus expecting a story. You fly expecting points. So how did we get here? Let's start with Cyprus. Football on the island is older than the state itself, shaped by British influence and built through clubs and local rivalries long before the flag changed in 1960. Cyprus had joined FIFA back in the late 1940s and played representative matches even before independence. But after 1960, the national team stepped into the real grind, World Cup and European Championship qualifiers, and that grind was brutal. Early Cyprus qualifying campaigns were basically a tour of Europe's heavyweights, and the scorelines often read like training matches. Cyprus would have moments, like a first friendly win over Greece in 1963, but competitive wins, those were not part of the story yet. In qualifying matches for the 1966 World Cup, Cyprus lost all 4 matches, didn't score, yet conceded 19 goals. And for the UEFA Euro 1968 qualification, Cyprus were placed into a group with Italy, Romania, and Switzerland. Think about that for a second. Italy, future European champions in 1968. Romania, chaotic, attacking, capable of putting 7 past you on the wrong day. And then Switzerland, disciplined, experienced, and carrying a national football culture that had been around forever. Cyprus were, in the crude language of qualifying, there to fill the fixture list. And the results back that up. In this same campaign, Cyprus lost 7-0 away to Romania and 5-0 away to Italy. Then came the first meeting with Switzerland on November 8, 1967, in Lugano, and Cyprus lost 5-0. That's the context. A 5-0 reverse fixture. A group where Cyprus were getting battered so far. 5 matches, 5 defeats. Cyprus had scored 1 goal and had conceded 24. And then, 3 months later, Cyprus hosts Switzerland in Nicosia in February, because back then qualifying didn't politely wait for spring. UEFA Euro qualification in the 1960s is a different universe. The finals were tiny, just 4 teams, basically semi-finals and a final in June, kind of the format we now have for the Nations League finals. This meant qualifiers were still being played deep into winter, right up close to the final tournament. So Switzerland arrive in Cyprus, knowing the table, knowing the gap, and knowing what happens in Lugano. And Switzerland are not nobodies. Even if they weren't a global powerhouse, they had real credentials, a long international story, a World Cup hosted on Swiss soil in 1954, and that Olympic silver medal from the 1920s that still sits in their sporting folklore. They had been to multiple World Cups by this point, including 1962 and 66, and while a decline may have been starting, it wasn't yet obvious to everyone. Their coach is Erwin Balabio, a former Swiss goalkeeper, nicknamed the Black Panther, a serious football man, a man expected to handle Cyprus. And then the match starts. Old GSP Stadium in Nicosia, about 8,000 in the ground. Cyprus are not expected to outplay Switzerland. Their realistic target is to survive, to stay respectable, to maybe get through the first half without the scoreboard running away. And then Cyprus do the one thing you absolutely cannot do as an underdog. They gift the favorite the lead. 9 minutes in, Cyprus score an own goal. Switzerland are now 1-0 up without really having to do anything spectacular. And that should be the moment the air goes out of the stadium. That should be the moment Cyprus fold, because that's what minnows do, right? Except Cyprus don't fold. They respond like a team that suddenly remembers. The match is not over because the name on the other shirt is bigger. And in the 22nd minute, Cyprus equalize. Menelaos Asprou makes it 1-1. And now the stadium wakes up. Now Switzerland feels something they didn't plan for, tension. And then comes the key moment, the kind that defines a national football memory for decades. Early in the second half, The 46th minute, Cyprus score again. Pamboulis Papadopoulos, 2-1. And now you're in the strange football territory where the underdog lead starts to feel real and the favorite starts to feel fragile. The remaining minutes become a test of nerve, because this is where experience is supposed to matter. This is where Switzerland is supposed to squeeze Cyprus back into their expected place. But Cyprus hold. They defend. They scrap. They manage the moments. And Switzerland, the team that looked so comfortable in Lugano, can't find a way through. Full time. Cyprus 2, Switzerland 1. And in one afternoon, Cyprus flipped the script. And here's the line that makes the story even better. Cyprus scored all 3 goals in the match, 1 into their own net, 2 into Switzerland's. And somehow, this sums up football perfectly. Chaos, courage, and the refusal to accept what the pre-match narrative says is supposed to happen. And now to the so what. Some news outlets compared this win to United States' 1-0 win over England in 1950. But what did this Cyprus win actually change? For Cyprus, it didn't instantly transform them into a qualifying threat. This wasn't the start of a golden era where Cyprus suddenly began rolling over mid-tier European nations. In fact, their next competitive win wouldn't come for another 5 years, a World Cup qualifier win over Northern Ireland in 1973. Cyprus would remain a tough place to go, a proud football culture, but still an underdog on the European stage. Their biggest ever win, 3-2 against Spain in the Euro 2000 qualification, was in September 1998, for 30 years after the first competitive win on this day in 1968. And we'll most certainly do an episode on that. However, and yet, that's exactly why this 2-1 win against Switzerland in 1968 matters, because it becomes a reference point, a proof-of-life moment, a day you can point to and say, we're not just a participant nation, we can win one of these. And for Switzerland, the match lands differently. It's not just 2 points dropped, it's humiliation, the kind that triggers questions about the direction of the national team. Switzerland would fail to qualify for Euro 1968, and soon the broader decline became clearer. They would also miss the 1970 World Cup, and Balabio's spell as national coach would end. This is how declines often look in real time, not like a slow, dignified fade, but like a shock result that exposes cracks you didn't want to admit were already there. And then there's the wider football meaning. This match sits at the edge of a bigger story, the slow democratization of international football, because in the 1960s, the finals were tiny and exclusive. By the time UEFA expands tournaments decades later, by the time the modern qualifying ecosystem creates more competitive balance, more matches, more data, more professionalization across smaller nations, results like this becomes less impossible. But in 1968, this is still the old world. This is still the world where you assume small football nations are simply there to absorb goals. Cyprus didn't just beat Switzerland, they challenged the hierarchy. And they did it with the most Cyprus scoreline imaginable, an own goal, followed by refusal to panic, followed by 2 goals that turned a qualifier into a national landmark. So 3 things to take away from February 17, 1968. First, the underdog's hardest enemy isn't the opponent, it's the moment you concede first. Cyprus conceded in the worst possible way, and still found a way to win. Second, football is nationhood in shorthand. For Cyprus, 7 years after independence, this wasn't just a sporting result. It was a story a new country could tell itself and keep telling today. And third, early Euros were ruthless. 4 teams in the finals, winter qualifiers, no safety net. Every match was either a step closer to history or a confirmation you don't belong. Cyprus, for one day, belonged. On this day in 1968, Cyprus scored 3 times, 1-2-1, and taught Europe a lesson. Minnows don't read reputations. That's all for episode 109 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by a 17-loss guy. If you enjoyed this one, please follow, rate, and share the show. It genuinely helps more people find it. And if you have a story you want me to cover, email me at otd@17lawsguy.com. Tomorrow, in episode 110, February 18, 1882, Ireland's first international, and a scoreline that still hurts to read. Ireland 0, England 13. See you then.